Welcome to the OhSoSpurs podcast. Fantastic Tottenham have beaten Liverpool against all the odds. Ange Postecoglou has exposed his doubters once again. We're going to be talking you through today how Ange changed his tactics, moved to a mid-block, and how that helped Tottenham beat Liverpool. We're all going to be discussing the yellow card debate, ranking Tottenham's players, Tottenham's odds of winning at Anfield, and do Spurs have the greatest goalkeeping dilemma in the Premier League? But we won't stop there. We will also be going over all of Tottenham's players under the age of 24 to discuss whether they are the best young set of players in the Premier League and also ranking them in order. So, to join me in these discussions today is Deej and Sully, California. How are you, Deej?
I'm doing good. I'm a little bit north of the Los Angeles fires, fortunately, but everything's great here.
Good to know you are well away from those fires. It's awful what's happening, by the way, on a serious note. But we are here to discuss Tottenham right now. So we have Stu as well. How are you, Stu?
Very good, very good. Managed to get home just in time for kickoff last night from my trip to Kuwait, so buzzing after an amazing result.
It sure was amazing. At the ground, the atmosphere was incredible, and we'll discuss that a bit later on. Tottenham beat Liverpool against all the odds. Well, despite a media narrative saying it was going to be a whitewash before the game. How did they do that, Deej? I've heard talks of a mid-block being the difference, and the stats do back that up, with Spurs only having 40% possession in the game. Did you see a shift in tactics yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, like, even if you didn't watch the game, you would know that we weren't being as brazenly attacking as we were the last time we played Liverpool by looking at the amount of goals that were scored, considering that you know how many. I'm not going to talk about the scoreline, but there were a fair few less goals in this game than there were in the last one, and that's kind of down to, I believe, down to two main reasons, I think. One of them is that we did sit back a little bit more. But we've seen Ange do this before in games like against City. We play in more of a mid block than we generally do. I think that the thing that really was the difference in this game wasn't necessarily down to, like, there were obviously tactical changes. Like, I think Spence and Porro didn't invert as much because we had less of the ball, so they didn't have time to take up those midfield areas. Also, the last time we played Liverpool, we kind of got eaten alive with the winger runs from both Salah and Gakpo. So having someone to cover those was really helpful for, not giving up easy chances, the kinds of easy chances that we gave up the last time we played. I also think that having a goalkeeper that's confident with his feet was just a game changer, because we've seen how Forster has been a very serviceable backup in goal. He's made himself some good saves, but he isn't able to play out with his feet the way that we need him to, especially when we have Dragusin, who doesn't have the best passing range either. So I think it's possible, and as we saw in this game, it is possible to kind of hide one of the three back line, because usually the first line of, like, anyone who wants to play out from the back is your goalkeeper and your two center backs. So I think it's easy to hide, like, one bad passer of the three, but hiding two is basically impossible. It puts so much stress on, in this case, Archie Gray, and then you can just mark him and then essentially force either Forster or Dragusin to try to pick out a pass. So I think that by adding Kinsky in, who was wonderful with his feet, I think the first touch of the ball was his flick up over, I think it was Jota, and then catching the ball. That, it's not whatever works for him. But I think that his passing ability was really what unlocked our ability to be less scared of having the ball. While saying that, we did actually, I think, go long as well, more than we did in past games.
Yeah.
Which, especially once we had, I think that might have been a bit of a product of having Bentancur unfortunately knocked out of the game as early as he was, because he's such a good connector of the lines. And while Bergvall and Kulusevski are both fantastic in their own rights, I think that that's a skill that Bentancur has perfected in a way that those two haven't yet. So I would say that obviously the plan could have been to go long from the beginning, but it also could have been something that we had to change in game, because the player who I think would have been the best at kind of breaking Liverpool's press was knocked out of the game in the 6th minute.
And Stu, from your perspective, the tactics for that game, did you notice anything else? I mean, I agree with Deej. I think there was clearly a shift to go long, and that might have been due to various reasons. And there was definitely definitely a lower block in the side as well, which suited Dragusin a bit better. But what else did you notice tactically about the game then?
I agree, and I think I agree as well with DJ that the substitution might have played in our favour, because not only were Liverpool seeing that Kinsky had an amazing long range pass on him, but bringing on Johnson, which despite all his faults, he's not the perfect winger, but what he does offer you is pace and out there on that wing. So they were having to drop back. So I think there was a lot less pressure being put on our back four and our keeper, which allowed us to, I'm not saying we're changing philosophy, but I think Ange has showed flexibility to deal with some of the criticism he's been giving about allowing the press to come on to us and always insisting on playing out. Again, it just shows he really does have a plan B, C, D, E, you name it.
Impossible.
This does all link to, though, guys, isn't it, what Ange spoke about in the past, that it's not just about injuries, it's about how absences impact cohesion as a team. And we noticed today, be that Vicario, be that Kinsky, just having that fundamental player of a goalkeeper that can use their feet suddenly opens up so many more avenues for the way in which Ange Ball needs to work. When you don't have that keeper, suddenly you're going, suddenly we've got to remove these 2 or 3 ways we play out of our game today and try and mitigate it with other ways. And it just doesn't work as well. But it felt like the players suddenly went, I can trust that person between the sticks. This is great. I've got an extra 20% of the pitch I can play the ball into, and I know that there'll be someone there who can pick that ball up and distribute it accordingly to fit how we play, rather than saying, I don't want to go back to Fraser Forster because he's going to probably lose the ball if I leave him in a situation where he's cornered by 2 other players.
Going back to my point on the way that having him being able to pass it long, if you look at our actual goal, it comes from the fact that we played it out. We didn't start off with a long pass. We played it out, but we were able to do it because they weren't pressing as much as they would have been normally.
Yeah, I also think just to point out how much more comfortable I think that we are with someone like Kinsky. I think it was in the first half, and I don't know if this was Ange sanctioned or not, but one of our I think few spells of possession in the first half that we had, we were passing the ball around the back, and Dragusin has the ball, and like the framing is such that Dragusin's in the back of the frame, and then Dragusin turns around and plays like a kind of a sideways backwards pass, like 15-20 yards maybe, and he's like at the halfway line. I'm like, oh god, what the hell did he just do? And then the camera pans over a bit, and Kinsky's like basically like in the center circle. So yeah, just having someone who's comfortable enough to do that and not worried about, misplacing a pass and then conceding one of those goals you see on Premier League highlight tapes for years to come is super reassuring.
Yeah. And so if we look at the players that did well in that game and had a massive impact, we've mentioned Bergvall now, you mentioned Dragusin there and Kinsky. I did want to put a bit of a shout out there to Dragusin, guys, because he's gotten a lot of criticism, understandably later, because as you mentioned earlier, both of you have already, that his passing range is not a strength of his. And the way we play, that's quite obvious when you make a player who's not capable at playing out the back as a natural tribute do it. But he was the player who cleared the ball off the line when it looked like it was a certain goal coming for Liverpool. Does Dragusin just suit those kind of games better, where you are going to concede possession and perhaps play a bit more counter-attacking?
Yeah, I think Dragusin is definitely his strengths basically all lie on the defensive side of the ball. And that's not to say that he's perfect there either. He did have, I think, the one cross that he got his legs messed up and let it run through him and nothing came from it. But yeah, I think that obviously a lot has been said about his passing ability. I don't actually think it's like as dire as it kind of seems. I think it, like I said, it's been magnified by having two players who can't like pick out a killer ball. Like Archie Gray has had in that game as well, like a couple of balls that were just like you would expect from like a midfielder, which I guess kind of he is. But and then like Romero, when he plays, is that player for us. So right now, like having like trying to have Dragusin play the Romero role isn't going to work because he doesn't have that passing range. He doesn't have that ability, and he's also not as adept at being as, I don't want to say brazenly aggressive because that's leaning into the stereotype too much of Romero, But Romero's brand of front foot defending is very hard to emulate, I would say. And I think that brand of defending is part of what makes our defense so good when he's there. It's part of what makes him such a good defender, is he's able to kind of break up play before an attacker is necessarily expecting him to be there, and that allows for that's part of the reason, like I said, he's so good. So part of it, I think, is that he's being compared to what I think is one of the best center backs in the world when he's on form. And part of it is just that he is better suited to a team that's defending more than attacking and isn't trying to play those killer balls from the back line. And if they are trying to play them, having the ability to pass it back to Kinsky, who has pretty good long range passing, pass it to Gray, who has good long range passing it to Toro, who has good long range passing as well, which we saw for the goal. When having the extra passers to bring the pressure off of Dragusin was also huge, like Stuart mentioned earlier.
And Stu, on the goalkeepers there. Oh, sorry, did you have a point you were already going to make
Yeah,
there?
just about Dragusin, I think also perhaps we as a fan base, we always put too high expectations on young players. We have to remember centre-backs tend to develop more with time, and we're blessed by having someone like Van der Ven who looks like amazing at the age of 22. But generally, centre-backs tend to develop a little bit later. And if you look at his experience playing, it's only in Italy. He's played for more defensive sides, so he's not really had to play in this type of expansive style before. So maybe we're just expecting him to hit the ground running and fit in with an Ange system, and he's just going to need a little bit more time to adapt. Or maybe, his fate is just to be a number 3 centre back, and he's good enough to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And people very easily forget his age all the time with Dragusin. I think he's treated like he's some kind of player in his prime years. And the criticism's often more difficult to hear, I find. Well, I wouldn't say difficult's the wrong word, perhaps a little bit more hypocritical from our own fan base when you think everyone was completely gassing over him when we beat Bayern Munich to the signature, saying what a wonderful signing, and rubbing it in their noses in it. You get the player, and then people start to complain about the player. It's a bit counterproductive. But the goalkeepers, Stu, obviously Kinsky had a great game, and we've touched on that. But, one game, we've seen players have great debuts before. I do think Kinsky is going to be fantastic for us. But Jose Mourinho once said that one day we'll see teams with 2 goalkeepers with different strengths, and those same players subbed in and out of a 90-minute game to change how a team plays. Could Tottenham be moving in that direction with Kinsky and Vicario, or do you think Vicario is still very much that number 1 goalkeeper for us, despite that, good start to the season for Kinsky?
I think no matter who is number 1, that it's always very difficult to have 2 number 1 goalkeepers. I think you always need an established goalkeeper to develop the relationship with the back line. And you look at any team that's tried to do it, and it's never really worked out. And I think we need to be careful of that. That said, I think a lot of people, Kinsky had an amazing game yesterday. I think considering he arrived, 2 days before the game? He's a young kid, 21 years old, probably never played in an atmosphere, a game like that, semi-final, he's making his debut, and he didn't look phased. I mean, Deej referred to that, the way he kind of flicked the ball up. Personally, I don't think he did that intentionally, but he never looked phased. He just dealt with it calmly. Later on in the game, he played a very poor pass out into the middle of the field where we lost it. Again, didn't let it affect him. Had the other blunder that went under him, saved it. And you'd have thought any normal 21-year-old, you'd crumble at something like that. Instead, not only didn't let it affect him, he seemed to grow in confidence as the game went on. And I think when you make a mistake, it's how you deal with that mistake. And the fact that 21-year-old, 60,000 people stadium in a semi-final made a mistake and grew, for me, just speaks volumes about him, his potential. And, Vicario is under a lot of pressure going forward because he's going to get a run of games, because I don't think Force is going to come back and take his place. I think he'll get a run of games. And if he performs well, it would be wrong, no matter how much I like Vicario, it would be wrong for any player to walk straight back into the side. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. That said, I do think that people have forgotten how good Vicario is.
Absolutely.
So this tale of all of a sudden, because the media always harped on about he was a clown and weak at crosses and always conceding goals from corners, people still have that in their minds. Like, we've got this great young kid. Or if you actually look at Vicario's stats before he went out injured, I think he was the second best or third best at dealing with crosses in the league. Conceded one goal from a corner, which was a flick on before the front post, which actually saved, which the rebound was then put in. So I think Vicario is a great keeper, but Kinsky is definitely the future.
Yeah. And we recently interviewed Kinskys, a coach at Slavia Prague, who obviously knows of Kinsky very much, being working at the same club as him, and he was telling us a bit about the personality of the player. And in the same way that Vicario very much passes the Ange Postecoglou personality test, so does Kinsky. He was saying Kinsky was asked where he was going on holiday after the season closed, and he said, "I'll go on holiday when I've finished playing. I've got to focus." He's that type of character. His father was a professional goalkeeper, and he's in that football family circle where they know your career's short. You've got to make the most of every single minute of it if you want to be one of the top elite players. And looking at the stats here, guys, that they do offer different strengths by the looks of it as well. Vicario, like you mentioned, Stu, I think we need to just plug in here that when we were doing this research, it was quite clear that the stigma that Vicario can't catch the ball was quite wrong. He really does sit in the top percentile of goalkeepers in the Premier League for his ability to stop crosses. And people say, Kinsky's never played at the top level, and a bit of defence for him as well. I don't think people realise he's been playing in the Champions League already. So he's played good size. This isn't a player who's coming from a league that's seen as lesser than the Premier League and hasn't proven he can do it on the big stage. He most certainly has. But there was another player, Deej, one you were very excited about us signing, that when we did sign. I was excited for you, and that is Lucas Bergvall, who has absolutely superb. Tell us more about his performance in the game, and we'll get onto the yellow card topic at the end of that.
Well, first of all, I think that this performance was a testament to how when we signed him, I said I don't know where he's going to play him because he could be like the kind of Madison backup number 10 type role, but he can also play as an 8 and, as we've seen earlier in the season, even a 6. And I mean, like, he started this game as either like a further forward 8 or a 10, depending on how you want to define the roles. But obviously, like I said earlier, tactics had to get shifted around very quickly when Bentancur goes down and you don't really have another midfielder on the. His just ability to play multiple positions across that midfield three, I think, is really, really good, both in terms of like being able to be tactically diverse and also to cover an injury crisis if it were to ever occur. Not like Tottenham's in an injury crisis or anything. I haven't heard anything about it recently, but he also just the way that his control of the ball. I can't remember who, but I saw someone saying that you can tell a lot about a player by his first touch, and his first touch is just immaculate. And he also is willing to put in work defensively, which is kind of one of the concerns I had, not necessarily based off of film, but just usually, the stereotype is that players who are more attackingly gifted are not necessarily the ones who are going to put in 110% on defense. But you can see sometimes he puts in a little too much effort on defense, because maybe if we're ignoring the fact that his first yellow shouldn't have been a yellow, he maybe should have gotten a second yellow for the foul on Tsimikas. In the grand scheme of things, we'll talk about it in a bit, but I'm not sure how much there is to talk about. I think everything evened out, considering that his first card of defense was absolute bollocks, to borrow a phrase from y'all.
Borrowing a phrase from old English language.
Exactly. But yeah, he just absolutely ran the game. And then also, just to say nothing of his finish, was just immaculate. I've been waiting for his first goal for the club, and as has been said ad nauseum, what a time to score it.
And you didn't even have the stats up then, and you got it spot on with the observations around his defensive contributions, right? You can see it there when we compare to James Maddison in the midfield position versus the attacking midfield position instead. So I'm just specifically looking at him playing in that midfield role. But Bergvall's clearances, blocks and tackles, and even pass completion is quite a bit higher. Obviously, where Maddison's strengths are, it does look like it's just a bit better at unpicking that lock as a player and being that slightly more creative player in the final third. But what a great situation we have You know, we talk about needing a squad that has players of different strengths and different options, and we've got some fantastic ones.
I think we've been also, in a kind of crazy way, lucky with the injury crisis that we've had, because he's played a lot more football than he would probably have expected to. I remember when he joined, his parents, etc., were saying the first year was going to be one of just adapting and acclimatizing, etc. And if you remember, I think it wasn't until the Rangers game that, I mean, he didn't look particularly good in any of the games he was playing. And now he's playing a lot more regularly. And you can see he's coming on leaps and bounds. And now, I mean, he does not look like an 18-year-old kid.
He does not. Yeah, as his dad said, it will take him 6 months before you see the real Bergvall, and we're seeing it now. So it's absolutely awesome. And we've harped on about it before, right? The big benefit of this injury crisis is all these young players who we were going, play them, please play them. We saw maybe why they weren't thrown in. Gone.
Speaking of injury crisis, forcing somebody to have to play, I've got to shout out my man, Jed Spence.
Yes, yeah. And Spence is one of those, right? There's players, well, I'd say Spence should have been a player that was rotated in sooner to avoid the injuries. But some of these younger players, we are quite well stocked in midfield, as example, when everyone's fit. So you could see why it might be like, oh, there's no need to rush in Bergvall because Bentancur is better. Like, at that point, he was a better player, so I'm going to play my better player each week. But we went through a little bit of short-term pain. Buryval did have a few, should we call it, scrappy performances when he first came on. But we've been through the pain and come out the other side of a player that's benefited from that hugely, and we can now rely upon them much more, and maybe they can even retain that spot. I don't see why not. Do you guys? I think, yeah. Archie Gray, though, guys, got to touch on him because, in my opinion, he's the future captain of Tottenham and England if he keeps going the way he's going. But absolutely sublime for a player out of position to be putting in those defensive performances. What did you guys make of the performance that day? I think it was his most composed performance, probably in a Tottenham shirt against the best side in the world, arguably as well, on such a big stage in a semi-final. Anyone want to summarise the game of Archie?
What is there to say that hasn't already been said? I mean, I feel like every time we talk about Archie Gray, it's always, oh, this is his best performance in a Tottenham shirt yet. And I think for most of the time it's been correct because he just keeps getting better and better and better, especially playing out of position. Like I said earlier, I think to a certain extent, the way that we like to play, that's kind of for the best for him, considering, like I said, he's able to pick out those passes that a midfielder normally would, and he's playing as a center back. And I think that kind of skill set that he has, that he's built up from playing both central in the center of the midfield and also as a right back, he's learned to pick out those longer passes, and that's been a pretty huge strength for him. And it's been one that when he chooses to use it, when the opportunity is correct, we've been able to have created some of our better attacking opportunities, especially in that last game. I also think that, yeah, I mean, he just does, you wouldn't, I would say if you look at our two center backs, you had to guess who was 18 years old based purely on their performances, not looking at them, because I mean you can kind of tell Dragusin's not 18. But if you just looked at the players' performances and you had to pick out which one was the 18-year-old, you'd probably get it wrong. And that's not disrespect to Dragusin. It's just saying how fantastic Archie Gray has been, continues to be. And I agree with you, Jim. I think he's definitely future captain material.
You took the words right out of my mouth, DJ. I was going to say exactly the same thing. If you look at them, he looks like the senior centre-back of the partnership. The way he's kind of telling Dragusin where to go, looking so calm. I mean, we're talking about Kinsky before, looking so calm and assured on the ball. I mean, when he gets it, he never looks flustered, even when he's under pressure. In that second half, when he got it under pressure, he managed to kind of dribble his way out and pass the ball out. I mean, it's just sublime. And as you said, Deej, it's a centre midfielder who has a year of playing at right back, playing at centre back. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I'm so looking forward to when he actually gets a run out at CM to see what he can actually do. Because, I mean, if that's his natural position, this kid is going to be one of the best in the world.
Well, that was the next question, actually. Does he retain that midfield starting spot as the six we've been missing when Van der Ven's back? Do we keep Dragusin at centre-back where he is, or do we keep Archie Gray and Van der Ven if he comes back first? Assuming one of Van der Ven and Romero comes back first, I guess the question is, does Gray or Dragusin fill the other spot? Because it does give you the opportunity to then move Gray forward into midfield, right? What would you guys do in that position?
I mean, obviously, you
Personally-
want to keep your best players on the pitch, and that, I mean, in this case, it is Archie Gray. I mean, I suppose there's a world in which, for whatever reason, Ange decides to play Dragusin. I would assume mostly for aerial protection, because for all the things Gray does better than Dragusin, I think Dragusin is still our best aerial protector of the ball by some distance. I'd say. I think he had a couple of times in this most recent game where he just was taller than everybody else and managed to clear some relatively scary Trent Alexander-Arnold crosses, especially in that last, like, when they realized that they weren't going to be able to go home to Anfield with a 0-0 draw, which I think they probably would have been happy with. Once they started kind of throwing bodies forward, I think that he, obviously including the goal line clearance, played very well. And so I'm saying all this to show that I'm not trying to talk down at Dragusin at all. However, I do think that if you want your best players on the field, I think it is probably Archie Gray and whoever comes back first.
And the
Yeah.
stat. Go on, sorry, Stu, you go first.
No, I was going to say I agree completely, 100% with what DJ just said. Also, because I think Bissouma gets a lot of criticism, but I think also he quietly had an amazing game yesterday, helping to protect the back four. And I think often the work he does off the ball, because sometimes with the ball he doesn't look that great, but I think the work he does off the ball, closing down the attack, does protect that back four. So I think you keep him there and you keep Archie Gray in the back with Van de Ven.
Okay, it's decided, Ange. We've made the decision for you. And look, did you seem to have I don't know, something inbuilt in your brain where you know the stats before you've seen them? Because yeah, everything you said was spot on as well about Dragusin having that more physical aerial strength, but Gray having those more progressive abilities. I guess it's pretty obvious when you stand those two people next to each other. One's a 17-year-old, slightly built, clearly midfielder, and the other is a bit of a monstrous-looking centre-back. There's a reason why everyone thinks Dragusin's knocking on 30 when he's only 22. He is a very well-built person for his age. So, guys, this leads... I'd love to go on to all the players, but we'll probably be on till midnight if we do that. So, go on, Deej.
I have no idea how Dominic Solanke continues to run for as much as he does.
Exactly.
That too.
Like that the goal was a fantastic finish from Bergvall, but the goal was his. Like, it was a great pass from Porro to put the ball in an area where Solanke could go get it. But at 86 minutes, having played, I think I saw like 1,020 out of the last 1,080 possible minutes for him to play, and he just runs, out muscles Konate, who is a fresh sub, and plays a inch perfect ball to Bergvall, who can just take it in stride and fire right into the near post. Just fantastic. Kind of wish that VAR hadn't been in the semifinals. Wish we could have just done without it so that he could have had a goal himself, because he really deserved one today or yesterday. But man, what a signing. I'm hoping that I can't remember who posted it, but someone who compared the signing prices of a bunch of Brentford players to Dom Solanke. I'm hoping that that's the equivalent of that one Italian journalist who kept making fun of us for signing Bentancur and Kulusevski.
But guys, we do need to move on to the next segment, and it's a great one. It's a fantastic one to be able to discuss. When you look at the number of young players that Tottenham have in their squad, and I define a young player as under 24 years old or under, I think we just define as a younger player. Once you pass 24, you're entering your mid-peak years, and then you're about 28 to 31 are your true peak, and then it's kind of typically a bit of a downward curve after that. But in the Spurs squad, they have Mikey Moore, Lucas Buryval, Will Lancashire, Sarr, Gray, Kinsky, Udogi, Kulusevski, Spence, Dragusin, Van de Ven, and Odegaard, all under the age of 24. It's one hell of a spine. Where do we start? Who are our top three players in that category, in your opinion? And I'll caveat that with, how much are they worth today? So if let's just say in a hypothetical world, Real Madrid come knocking on the door, there's nothing we can do to prevent them from leaving, but we can name our price. I'd like to know how much you'd value them at. And should we start at number one in the most valuable player out of that crop?
This is so difficult because like there's I think there's two different ways you can go about this. It's like who's like provided the most for the team, like as a player, and that's obviously going to skew towards some of like the older players, the 20, 23, 24-year-olds. Or you can go with like the players who you think have the most potential, and I'm talking mostly there about Like you've got Gray, you've got Bergvall, and overall, I think more than any of them, you've got Mikey Moore, who's like unfortunately has been out with an illness for like 4 months now, which thank God he's okay, it seems. But like it's hard to pick just 3 out of these because you've got Van de Ven, you've got Kulusevski, and like those players are players that like if you like had to build a team around right now, if you had to build a team right now to win the Europa League, Carabao Cup, FA Cup, the league, whatever, if you're picking Mikey Moore over Kulusevski and Van de Ven, then I would have to look at you a little crazy. But if you're building a team for the future, I can see an argument for picking a player like Mikey Moore, who just seems to have the world at his feet. So this is a really difficult.
Well, this is why we're here. It's why we're paid the big bucks, Deej. We've got to answer the tough questions. Who's your number 1 on the list?
It's got to be Archie Gray. I'm going to say it's Archie Gray. I'm going to. He, like you said, I think he's got so many great on-field qualities. I think once he grows up and like grows into his body a little bit more, because I do think he's still probably a little weaker than it would be necessary to have like as a full-time 6. But he's got the frame to be to be that kind of, to be more bulky. He just needs to finish growing. I guess he's only 18, but him, and then also on top of all of the fantastic footballing qualities he has, he does seem to have those intangibles. Like you see that in the game with Manchester United, where he was taking credit for the own goal, one of the own goals that essentially wasn't an own goal, but a Fraser Forster misstep that led to a goal. He was taking credit for it. When I honestly, like a player who wasn't as like mature, could have just been like started yelling at the goalkeeper, like, "What are you doing?" Like, I don't know if you guys have seen the videos going around where Meslier makes a mistake and all of the back line, instead of like going to like tell him like, "Oh, it's okay, you'll get him next time," they all just start rolling their eyes, and like a less mature player would do that. But Gray isn't that kind of player, and so I think because of that, I think he's got the footballing skills, and he's got it. To me, it seems like the intangibles to become a captain, and I think that's just priceless.
Shu, do you have a different number 1, or are you with Archie Gray?
I think Gray is a very good call. The only one that potentially I would put there, but again, it's in a dream world where we know his hamstrings will never go again, would be Mickey van de Ven. Because I think if it wasn't for the hamstring issues, he would be the most sought after centre-back in the world. Because he has everything. Absolutely everything.
So what is...
Feels wrong to not even talk about Kulusevski.
I know, I was going to say that. But don't worry, we've got a 2nd and 3rd spot, and this is the great dilemma that Tottenham have. It's actually madness that we've got this dilemma right now, that Kulusevski... It's crazy that you put Kulusevski in any other team in the Premier League and ask this question. I think it's hard. You're hard-pressed to find one that doesn't go Kulusevski straight away. It's like the prized young asset of our team. But what is Archie Gray worth?
Priceless.
Today, you're looking at what, at least 80 million? At least.
Yeah. I would say probably 80 to 100, somewhere within there, but we're not going to sell him.
No.
I think
No, it's just a bit, just hypothetically, what's
actually
he worth?
I think considering contract length, I think he's worth more. Like if he was in like the last year or two of his deal, then it's 80. But like I think considering the amount of time that we have him under contract for, I think you could probably push that number north of it.
Let's say £100 million, Archie Gray. You have the world at your feet, young man. Don't let us down. Please, please. Is Kulusevski nailed on 2nd place then, guys?
No.
No? Not from Stu. Go on. Who's your number 2?
It would be Mickey.
Mickey for you? Mickey or Kulu for you?
I was actually looking
Buryval.
at that's who I was looking at as my second player, because it's a bit presumptive to say him, considering he's performed for. His performances have started to come on the uptick, but he's not as like consistent as someone like Van de Ven or Kulusevski. But man, he's 18. He's only going to get better, and he's getting to the point where if he continues putting in the performances he's going to be demanding a starting spot at a top 6 club at the age of 18, and I think that's just crazy. I think I'm going to go.
I'd rate him above Kulu. I think Kulu. I think we all forget, because he has played so well this season, is how poor he was last season.
That's true.
He's brilliant, but I think Madison has more goals, assists, contributions than Kulu. I'm not saying that I would play Madison above Kulu. I'm just saying that those are some of the drawbacks if you look at the position he's playing versus what they can add. That's why I would have Mickey, because I think he has obviously with my Italian background, you don't concede goals, and that Mickey is going to stop with that. That's why I would have Mickey above Kulu for a second.
Okay, there we go. And then Bergvall, I think I'm going to lean on too. So I think we've got and you're so right, Stu, like it's very easy to get blinded by recency bias in a lot of things with players. So Bergvall's worth, guys?
I think it's probably similar to Gray, maybe a little bit less. We'll say 95 if we said 100 for.
I was going to say something like 70 or 80 million.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Based on one amazing performance at Anfield and a couple of decent performances before, but why
18.
not?
He's 18.
But he is 18. He is. Was it Arshavin who had the most amazing debut for Arsenal and then kind of petered out? I know, who was it?
Yeah.
And Makeda.
Arshavin scored a hat-trick, didn't he, on debut for Arsenal?
I think it was that. Yeah, and it was Makeda for Man United who they thought they'd sign
two goals. Yeah, as a 17-year-old.
And then never saw him again. But I think there's a bigger test pool there. And I think Van der Ven's, right, guys, nailed on third then, we're saying?
I mean, again, showing my Italian football influence. I was comparing. No, I was thinking comparing Kinsky to Buffon, the impact that Buffon hit the ground and the impact he has on all teams. If Kinsky has this impact and is our goalkeeper for the next 10 to 15 years, he could be at that level. I mean, how much is a top class goalkeeper worth?
Yeah, that you'll see the Slavia Prague Instagrams, like official pages. They're all like super excited for him and bigging him up since his departure. They're really happy for him. They genuinely feel he is the next Petr Cech type player for their nation, right? So they're super chuffed for him, and they think we've got an absolute steal, and it does look like we may well have done that. So maybe Kinsky at number 3 then, based on his whole 90-minute. Go on, Steve. I've got to go in a sec, but go on.
It's crazy because you've got Kinsky to fill the third spot. You've got Kulusevski to fill the third spot, who I'm not going to take as much disrespect from as Stuart is maybe throwing at him. But I think he's still a fantastic player, and he deserves to make this list. But you've also got Destiny Udogie, who last season was looking like one of the best fullbacks in the world before he got injured, and he hasn't really found that form yet, which is kind of what's keeping him off this list right now. But he's still a fantastic player, and would still make this list on a lot of teams. You've got an unknown quality in Odegaard, who I still have hope for. I think he will bring a new angle to this to our team when he's able to play, when he's finally healthy. And then you've also got Mikey Moore, who I mentioned before. But it's so hard to pick. But I do think if I had to pick a third one, it would probably be Van de Ven.
I think so.
Van de Ven, if I can guarantee that his hamstrings are
exactly.
put together with.
But
whatever.
That's why he's third and not first, right?
Yeah.
You could look at it like that. Guys, we're going to wrap up there. But we there's so much to look forward to. We're going to bring another episode to preview. Well, we'll do a live watch along of Tamworth, shall we, guys? That'll be good fun. So you want to be a part of that, make sure you like and subscribe to the video. We'll be doing a live watch along and analysis of the game as it goes, and we'll be bringing you a preview of next week's Premier League fixture as well. So up the Spurs, everyone. We have one toe in the Carabao Cup final. I wouldn't say a foot yet, as you've got to go to Anfield, but one toe in the final. There you go. Up the Spurs.
Spurs.